we address them. What we'd love to do, though, now is take you through some of the key elements that we're going to be covering in our retreat in May. So from May 7th to 9th at the Fairmont Hotel in Vancouver, we will dive into leadership branding as part of our super crucial leader retreat. But today we wanted to kind of give you an overview so that you know what we're thinking of covering. Of course, we'll be diving deep into all of these elements at the retreat itself. So sign up for that if you see something here that you love. If you want to know more, if you'd like to talk to us directly, if you'd like to be part of the workshops and the coaching and everything else that will go on at the retreat, we would love to have you there. But in the meantime, I'd like to start by sharing a quote from, one of my favorite directors, Steven Spielberg. And he says, the delicate balance of mentoring someone is not creating them in your own image, but giving them the opportunity to create themselves. I think that for a lot of us in leadership positions now, we really see leadership as an opportunity to mentor, more so than an opportunity to rule or, push or force or any of those kinds of things. And that's why I really loved this quote, because the idea of mentoring and allowing someone to become who they are is such an important element of leadership as we enter the age of AI. More and more of the rote jobs and the rote kinds of things, the ways of doing things, are going to become less our focus, and more of our focus is going to be on the human piece of it and the idea of helping people rise to their potential, rise to their energy, live within their capability and beyond. And so this quote to me is really a strong indication of that. And, one of the things, and I know, Cheryl, I'd love your thoughts on this, but I know at the retreat, one of the things that we really want to focus on more than anything is not that old style of leadership, but what a leader needs to be from this day forward, and how leaders need to jump into what is coming when it comes to AI and future of work and all of the various things that are taking us in a whole different direction.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, I think both you and I have said the skills that got us to where we are today are certainly not the skills that are going to get us to where we're going. And, you work with leaders, I work with leaders. And what I'm seeing is leaders are definitely, invigorated and dealing with change. They've been dealing with change for decades, but now the challenges are accelerated and excessive, really. The challenge of time, the challenge of hybrid dynamics, the challenge of AI and what does it mean for the company and for leaders, the challenges of how do we keep everybody engaged. So yes, absolutely. It's a really challenging time for leaders.
It is 100%.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, let's jump right in. Some great leaders are born, but most are made. The truth is that, most of us don't, grow up being amazing leaders. We learn different skills and things on the schoolyard and in the workplace and all throughout our lives. But most of the time it takes work to arrive at building a leadership style and a leadership brand that is going to really help you progress in your career and manage your teams in the best possible way. It really relies on things like honesty, collaboration, the ability to look deep into your soul and understand who you are. So before we can even talk about leadership brand, we have to really focus on this idea that it requires a lot of self-reflection and it requires a lot of thinking around how you see yourself and how others see you. On the next slide, we really jump into some of the challenges. And, at the retreat itself, we'll dive deep into all of these challenges that leaders are facing. Everything from leading hybrid teams, whether that's geographically or, area of focus or discipline, keeping people engaged. There's a lot of noise out in the world right now, quieting that noise and anxiety. Defining the influence of technology and AI. A lot of people are struggling with the idea of what will this mean to us and how do we manage folks in order to leverage the technology that changes at a rapid pace, but also, not be engulfed by it or eaten up by it. So that's going to definitely be a topic. And then finally, for all of us personally, building that personal motivation, wanting to really focus in the areas that are going to help move us forward and not losing our own passion, our own desire to be better. Not getting so far into ourselves that we think, oh, well, we're really good at this now, and always being open to learning and rethinking. And so when we talk about leadership brand, this is not a one and done. It never is a one and done. I often say, whether we're branding for an organization or branding for a leader, this is a living, breathing thing, and brand is a living, breathing thing. And you have to constantly be looking at it and evaluating and reevaluating and pivoting. So although we want to land at a structure and a process, going back to that structure and process is really important as you build out your leadership brand. Great. So what are we going to cover today? We want to kind of give you a really good taste of what's going to go on at the retreat. And so we focused on some, really key areas. Number one, why does leadership branding matter today more than ever? How can you start or adapt? So some of you may already have a great leadership brand and you just want to revisit, or you just want to adapt. I think the structure is still the same. And kind of asking yourself some of these same questions is going to be just as important. But on the other side, if you're starting from scratch, knowing where to begin, like, there's nothing worse than a blank page. So hopefully if we can give you some pointers and tips and tricks, that will be helpful. What are the considerations that you need to have as you're building out your leadership brand? And then finally, how do you define success? And we'll also share some examples of some leaders that you probably know. And what about them are some key elements of their leadership brand and how they approach leadership and their style and all of those things.
Yeah, and I'd just like to say before we continue, Brad, that we do have the comments section available. So if you do post, we will see them and we will respond to them as we go. And also, I wanted to acknowledge, Brad, that we didn't go live with the countdown or the music or your intro. So for those of them who saw us start, we started right with the content. So just so you know, there was a little bit of technical difficulty there at the outset, but we're all good now. So we'll keep going. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah. So this is our first LinkedIn Live. So please bear with us. We will get the technology down sooner rather than later.
Exactly.
I think, one of the key things, and one of the things that I'd like to say too, is that, one of the things I talked about in the intro that you may not have seen is that everything that we're talking about today is leading up to the retreat in May. So from May 7th to 9th, we will be really diving deep into all of these topics, leadership brand, the age of AI, the future of work, all of the elements of the retreat. And you can go to supercrucialleader.com where you can find out way more information, find out about signing up and doing all of those kinds of things. So it's supercrucialleader.com, all one word. Go there and you'll see a lot more. So the question is, how do you get to a strong leadership brand? There's really three key components. What are your goals? How are you seen? And why will a brand help? Often folks ask us these questions and say, why do I need a leadership brand? Why do I need to, move forward developing a brand around who I am as a leader? I'll just show up, do my job, manage my folks, and that'll be it. The truth is that in order to inspire, in order to motivate, in order to become a great leader, you can't just phone it in. And so, there's the background and there's the work that has to be done. And, we've really divided it up into three key areas. The first one is self-assess. The second one is ask others. And the third one is know the steps. So we've kept it very simple and really focused on allowing you to accomplish your leadership brand without too much, complexity, or, we want to keep it as simple as possible so that you can do it and really focus on who you are. So under self-assess, what are the primary elements that you need to keep in mind as you're going through? So the first one is really defining who you are and what you stand for. At the end of everything, integrity and authenticity are so important to your leadership brand. And so you have to be really clear about who you are and what you stand for. And it can't be about what you think is the hottest ESG or DEI policy and what you think about that. It can't be about, why you feel that, sustainability is important. Those things may all be important in your life, and they may all be important to you as a person. But what does that look like in your principles? What does that look like in what you stand for and how you show up? So that's your first question, is what do you stand for? Next is, what are your superpowers? The truth is that we're all great at certain things. Most of us are not great at everything. We have our flaws, we have our things that we need to work on, but we do have those few things where we're kind of like, oh, you know what? I kill it in that area. So figure out what those are. Understand what your superpowers are and why you bring, a really strong perspective in certain areas, and how you can be really, really strong at that. What is your reputation? And the key to this one is you have to be absolutely honest. Now, when we get to the second stage, which is ask others, we're going to be asking others about what their perception of your reputation is, and you'll see that in that series of questions. But for this one, I think you really have to, open the kimono and say, who am I really? And how do I show up? And what do people really think of me? And be honest about it. Don't sugarcoat it. Don't try to make yourself sound better. At the end of the day, you're not fooling anyone if you're not being really honest with yourself around where your superpowers are, where your flaws are, what you do well, what you don't do well, and what people think of you. And getting that down before you go and ask others is really important, because one of the things that we're going to be doing as we're building a leadership brand is evaluating our perception against reality. And, sometimes it's our perception of ourselves and our reality of ourselves, or others' perception of us or reality of us. So there's a lot of, gray area in all of those things, but ultimately we want to have a really clear understanding of what's going to get us to where we need to be. What personality traits do you want to use to describe yourself? Are you a risk taker? Are you compassionate? Like, really put down words and try to keep it to a single word or a series of words that, can really build around what that looks like. In the retreat, we'll be doing a whole exercise around this, because there's a little bit of a science to it. And it really works well when you do this in a large group. And I think that for those of you who will be at the retreat, we'll go through that exercise. But even if you're not there and you want to do something like this, get the words down, look at different words, use a thesaurus, understand all the different things, because even sometimes a word like empathy or compassion, there can be a whole bunch of different ways of describing that. And finding the right word that hits on how you want to show up is really important to this process. Okay. And then finally, what skills have you already developed? What are you already good at? You may be well into your career. You may be, well into your leadership. And you may have developed some things and had people's feedback that says, you know what, you're really good at this, or I think you really have the ability to do this. On the flip side of that is, what are the skills that you constantly hear over and over, either in your 360 feedback or your evaluations, where people are saying, you know what, probably could be a little bit better at this, or, if you could show up this way a little bit more, that would be extremely helpful. So be really clear about that, around what your skills are and what the areas are that you need to develop. This self-assessment piece is really important to get down before you even move to step two. Step two is asking others. And this is where you're going to solicit feedback. You're going to solicit, others' opinions of you, but have your self-assessment fully built out before you go into this, because one of the things that we struggle with all the time is our own bias or others' biases. And so we have to be really cognizant of the fact that, we don't want to start asking others when we're not really clear about what our vision of ourself is.
Yeah, and I just wanted to add to that, Brad. Like, I've known you for a number of years now, and you are an absolute wizard at this. And when we look at your brand and how you show up,
Mhm.
asking others, and you and I coming together is because our brands commingle very well. We have similar
100%.
values, similar brand. Yeah, so I think in my experience with leaders, the leaders that don't have a solid brand, they kind of struggle. They struggle because and actually the way people perceive them is not necessarily who they are. And so that this is just so critical. I like that you're heading into ask others, because it's one thing to think to think that we think what we are, right? But then having the courage to have other people tell us what they perceive us to be. So
Yeah.
I'll hand it back over to you.
That's
Yeah.
such a great point, Cheryl. And I think, something that you said, which is really, really true, is that, we came together because our brands align. But I also
Yeah.
think our values align, our the way we look at the world aligns. Now, I would say I'm not sure that we would have, or that I would have been clear on that 20 or 25 years ago.
No,
Like it takes a lot of work to arrive at the understanding of who you are and how others perceive you. And
agreed.
so, no matter where you are in your leadership journey, I'm constantly evaluating myself. I'm
Yeah.
constantly evaluating my team and others that I manage. I'm constantly telling them to evaluate themselves. It's really such an important part of who we are as humans. That idea of constant learning. Constant learning is not just about external learning; it's about internal learning as well, and really getting a handle on who you are.
And I think that's a huge part of being future of work ready
Yeah.
is the constant self-evaluation. Gone are the days where you just kind of go, I'm good. I'm good. No, don't need to. It's like, no, you may be good. You may be even great. And unless you're constantly reevaluating, self-assessing, checking in to make sure you are exhibiting who you are, your brand is aligned with your behaviors, all of that is critical to the future. So
100%.
yeah.
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 Perfect. All right. Ask others. Okay, so how do we do that? And believe me, I understand that this is not always an easy thing to do. I think that one of the best pieces of advice that I could have for you in this area is to identify both professional and personal contacts. I think that, if you go with just professional contacts, they might not give you the full 411 on who you are. Often your personal contacts won't hold back as much on some of the maybe negative aspects of your personality. So I find that the best way to do this is to mix the two together and really get a good sense of how people perceive you. Some of the main questions that you want to ask them is, what would they say about you if they were describing you to someone else? What would they say about you, both positive and negative? Because I do think that testimonial approach, or asking them to give a bit of a testimonial about you, is a really strong way for them to, tell you without making it too personal. So if you kind of approach it from that direction, it's helpful for them and it's helpful for you as well. What would they say are your strengths and weaknesses? I mean, and don't accept, oh, your biggest weakness is that you give too much, Brad. Like, that's not a weakness. That's just someone not wanting to be, real with you. So ask them to really be frank and forthright around, what they think you do well, what they think you don't do as well. It might be a little hard to hear. We all have egos, and we all have, sometimes it's hard to hear feedback. But I do think it's important to this process. And ultimately, it will be, hugely beneficial to your process. Okay. Do they see you as authentic? That's a really good
Mhm.
one. And because I know a lot of leaders, or have known a lot of leaders in my past and present even, where they're really strong at the analytical elements of leadership. They're really strong at knowing how to manage a team, or what the analytical elements of managing a team are. Where they might fall down a little bit is that their EQ might not be as high as their IQ, and so they have to do a little bit of work on the emotional side, and really coming across as genuine, and they might be great at information and creating a democratic environment and all of those kinds of really strong leadership capabilities. But where they might not be as strong is sharing their passion or showing up vulnerable or some of those other elements. So authenticity is a really good barometer of how people, whether people believe you or not, right, around how you think you show up. And so when you ask it from that perspective, it's really easy for them to say, let me think about that, and then be really honest with you. The last one is, how would they describe your energy? It's interesting because a lot of times we think, well, if we have all of the knowledge and if we have all of the elements of leadership, we can be great leaders. But the truth is that you can deliver the same message with different kinds of energy, and people will perceive it and accept it in very different ways. Being able to manage not only your own energy, but understanding the energy that others are sitting in is such an important part of how your leadership brand is going to help you. Now, at the retreat, we will spend a lot of time on this because it's such an important part, and it really delves into not just leadership brand, but all of the elements of leadership. And so energy and motivation and passion and all of those things will be an integral part of what we'll cover in the retreat. Cheryl?
Yeah, no, I was just going to say to that energy piece, for any of you who've already been to the website, supercrucialleader.com, we talk about energy, and it's a little bit weird and wacky and wonderful, and it's also timely.
Yeah.
It's not about time management anymore. It is about energy management. And that is a skill that, if we're looking at ourselves as leaders, as constantly learning and growing and evolving, then it's about energy management. Am I matching the energy of the people that I'm interacting with? What is my energy imprint? How do I show up? And how do people experience me? So that's very much in line with brand, but it's also a big portion of what we'll be talking about, which our retreat, it has so many components that I don't think you'll get anywhere else all in one. The AI leveraging, the energy management from a place of the latest research on energy, the branding expertise that you bring, Brad, the future of work research and the research we've done on worker attitudes and the surveying we've done. And just quickly, because time is of the essence here with what we're presenting, the survey that we did, the polling, the number one response was, what are the leadership traits that you most value? We did the LinkedIn poll. The number one trait was transparency.
Nice. Yeah.
So I'll hand it back over to you, but yes.
Thanks, Cheryl. Yeah. I'm not surprised at that. The authenticity, transparency element is so crucial. How we led in the past, or how leaders led in the past, is very different than what the expectations are now. And, I'm not sure that 20 years ago, a leader would say, oh, I need to be as transparent as possible. It just wasn't necessarily a thing, but it is a thing now. And I do think that, preparing ourselves to lead in the age of AI, to lead in the age of this, rampant technology, we have to be way more human than perhaps we have been in the past. And, this is why we named it Super Crucial Human and Super Crucial Human Retreats. It's that humanity piece is so key. Finally, and this is the part that we're going to focus on in the retreat back to back, but that is knowing the steps. And we're going to spend a lot of time at the retreat going through these steps and building, and you will have the opportunity in the retreat to build a leadership brand, at least the blueprint for your leadership brand. There will be, more work that needs to be done after, but at least you will have the structure and the capability to understand on how you can adapt or build your leadership brand based on where you are today, whether that's a blank sheet or whether that's, a really strong career where you've been hugely successful, and you just want to kind of take it to the next level. So let's get into the steps right away. Really, the primary thing, we went through a self-assessment and ask others. What you need to do once you finish that is you need to compare the rankings, your own rankings with others' rankings. In the retreat, we'll also take a look at the top leadership traits. We will identify those leadership traits. We will, rate ourselves on each of those leadership traits. So that will be part of the evaluation as well. So you can expect that in the workshop and in the exercises. But really, in addition to those leadership traits, it's also your level of authenticity and all the things that we talked about already. How do you rank in your own self-assessment versus how others would put you? And I think that that's really an important part of how you arrive at what needs to be done for your leadership brand. Then we move into, refining the personality elements. You may have put a series of words or elements, and there may be conflicting elements, there may be supporting elements that others have brought forward to you. Really looking at what those are and how you can build them together, and understanding how you can add to them or adapt them based on your evaluation. This becomes a really important part, so that you can arrive on the 5 or 6 traits that you can use to be the core values of what your leadership brand is. And we'll definitely do that exercise in the retreat, but it's an exercise that you can also do on your own. And even if you're doing some pre-work, starting to think about what those words and traits could be. The next thing you have to do is create compelling story elements. At the end of the day, as human beings, we tell stories and we like to listen to stories. We don't want to hear a bunch of random facts. It doesn't mean that we shouldn't be supported by numbers or facts, or it shouldn't be some made up fairy tale. But we have to take all of those elements and turn them into a story that feels compelling and engaging to the listener. And so you have to do the same for your leadership brand. And you have to look at yourself as a whole human. If you are just an analytical powerhouse who knows how to increase revenue at every turn, that's wonderful. But, for the people on your team, that might not be enough. So what else makes you a whole human? What else allows you to recognize their humanity? What else allows you to be compassionate or empathetic or passionate about what you're doing, what the team is doing, how you're showing up, all of those things. So we call that a whole human centric approach. And, we'll go into a lot more detail on this in the retreat, but it's really the difference between what technology and AI can do or can't do. This is the part where, as humans, we still have the power in this area to really be, the purveyors of that whole human-centric approach, and really allow people to do those things. Next, you want to map out how you're going to showcase your brand. What does that look like? What does it feel like visually? Is there a story? Do you have a little elevator speech? Do you change your LinkedIn page? Do you change your social media feeds? Do you have separate feeds for different elements of your brand? There's a lot of questions in there, and that really becomes almost like your personal marketing plan. But we call it showcasing your brand because it's really about how you show up out in the marketplace, and whether that's in a current role that you're already in and you just want to go deeper on your brand in your current role, or whether you're a freelancer or an entrepreneur and you're trying to build something beyond that, or whether you're trying to add a side gig, or you want to move into consulting. Really deciding who you are and what you want to be as a leader all culminates in how you showcase that brand. And so we'll talk a lot about that in the retreat as well. And then finally, growing your network and your influence, understanding that, the more people you tell, the more people that will know, the more people that they will tell. I don't know if a lot of you remember those commercials, but I told 2 friends and they told 2 friends. And I mean, that is the core of how, social networking works. And I think that, anytime that you can build your, your social assets, anytime you can build your networking capability, anytime you can build your influence, it will help for a larger group of people to see your leadership brand and your leadership style. Now, that could be your current team, it could be your expanded team, it could be future team members. If you're trying to recruit or retain, and Cheryl will talk a lot about that in different, LinkedIn Lives and at the retreat itself. But if recruitment and retainment is a huge piece of it, a big element of that is who you are as a leader if you're trying to bring others on to kind of join your ranks or your team or your sphere of influence. So really making sure that you grow that and using all of the different elements of your leadership brand to enable that to happen. Good. All right. So what leads to success? What are the elements that we look at to determine whether your leadership brand is successful or not? There's, it's not an extensive list, but there are some key things that are really important. I talked a lot about this idea of authenticity, how you show up, understanding how you show up and showing up real is an important part of defining authenticity. Are you seen as authentic? Do you see yourself as authentic? Are you choosing things in your leadership brand that are authentic to you and that you're just not putting them in there because you think that's what people want, because they'll see right through that quickly, and that will limit their buy-in of your brand. Next is congruency. Do you walk the talk? Is what you say and what you do congruent? Do you show up and speak up and teach and mentor in the same way that you've promised? And that congruency can make or break you, quite frankly. It's probably one of the most important on this list. But closely behind it is integrity. Again, authenticity is whether people believe you, and integrity is if they continue to believe you. And it's about showing up time and time again, and being consistent and being, really real about who you are and what you stand for. Next is your contribution. Are you a leader who just, gives instructions and then, goes away and you never follow up and you never do the kinds of things? People want to see that you have a little bit of skin in the game. People want to see that you are, your blood, sweat, and tears are as important to the team as their blood, sweat, and tears. And the more often you'll see, the more you give. And again, you might not be giving the same thing as your team members. You might be giving experience or wisdom or things. But if you are giving, then they will give as well. And that is such an important part of how we evaluate, a great leadership brand. How are you at communication? Look, I know not everyone is a communicator. I get it. You know what? Relationships are one of the hardest things to manage. We're not always great at them, whether it's personal, business, professional, doesn't matter. But, if you're not a great communicator, how can you be a better communicator? This is one of those areas where, where we said great leaders are not born, they're made. This is a real opportunity for you to make yourself a leader, is to become a better communicator. Because quite frankly, without the communication skills, you cannot be a great leader. You absolutely cannot. So if you are lacking in any area, you need to make sure that you build those up and that you're really capable of understanding where your flaws and opportunities are. Next is your pioneering and innovation. People are always going to be looking at you for ideas or ideation. They're going to come with theirs, but they're also going to want to run them by you and expand on them. So what are you doing to stay current? What are you doing to stay up on things? In the age of AI, understanding, you don't have to become a technology expert or an AI expert, but when you have a leader who, gets on their computer and says, oh, I don't know how to use this thing, or that severely limits a lot of the other things that you're trying to build as a leader. So although you don't have to be an expert, you do have to make sure that you are not, an ancient relic at the same time. So really make sure that you're, up to date on things, that you can speak to all of the different elements. I often say, like, current affairs, current events, current technology, the more current you can stay, the easier it will be for you to do this part of it. So that's a big piece. And we'll be talking a lot more about that at the retreat, on how to do that better and how to get into that. And then finally, collaboration. Do you walk into a room, give your 2 cents and go, okay, I have another meeting, and walk out? You are not going to win friends and influence others by doing that. The truth is that if you are not listening as much as you're speaking, if you are not offering the floor as much as you're taking the floor, no one is going to believe all the other elements of your leadership brand. So really make sure that and one of the tricks, and I'll share that with you here. I mean, we'll share it in the retreat as well. But one of the tricks I have for that is the pause. Anytime you feel like you want to say something, or you want to contribute, or you want to add something, take a beat and just ask yourself quickly in your head, am I adding value, or am I detracting from what that person just said? Like, am I about to mansplain something? Am I about to, say exactly what someone just said in other words? Take a beat, stop yourself, and understand that collaboration is way more powerful than yet one more piece of wisdom that you might be able to add.
Yeah, I
Cheryl?
think that's a key future of work right there. Like collaboration is the future. It's no longer the lone wolf. It's no longer the single hero. No
Yeah,
single leader has all the answers, nor should they in today's environment.
yeah,
And our ability to collaborate, as you said, in an effective way where it's an equitable give and take of ideas and recognition and support, that is where we're at. And for driver personalities, this is not easy, because
no,
the whole I'm a driver. So the whole thing about driver is let's get it done, let's make it happen, and it's easier if I do that by myself.
it's true.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yep,
But honestly, the opportunity, the numbers of leaders that I coach where they are really struggling with this piece. Like they call them, they would say that they're collaborators, but they're struggling with elevated collaboration, which is exactly what you said, taking that beat, putting the ego aside for a moment and just
yep,
going, do I need to say something here? Or, yeah. So well, I'm cognizant of time, Brad. We have about 9 minutes left. So
yeah, we're
let's
good.
keep going. You're doing
Yeah,
an amazing job. Thank you. Yeah.
yeah, my pleasure. Listen, we can go right into the examples. Let's
Yeah.
take a look at some examples. So, I tried to choose folks that most people would know, to give you a real sense of kind of what makes them good at what they do. There are all different kinds of leaders, but let's take Tim Cook, for example. Obviously, the CEO of Apple, very different than Steve Jobs, probably night and day different from Steve Jobs. But what makes him a great leader? Well, first of all, he's a democratic situational leader, and we'll talk about leadership styles at the retreat. But really, what that means is that he is an active listener. He makes decisions based on input and evaluation. He's not kind of run into the room, say, this is what we're doing, make it happen. He's really thoughtful around, what could work, what might work. He has a big focus on operational excellence and financials, and really ensures that the company is running in the best possible way. I mean, he was given an incredible legacy when it came time for him to take over. So, his ability to manage that legacy has been very good. Now, some people will say that he's not as innovative as Steve Jobs was, but I do think when I look at his leadership brand and his style, he does align core values with pioneering. So he does look for those pioneering opportunities. But in a lot of ways, Apple has evolved away from, kind of the latest innovation or the latest thing. I mean, they still build that, but their technology contributions still continue to happen, just not in the same kind of, big circusy kind of way that Steve Jobs absolutely loved. And that's fine, and I think Tim Cook was a really strong leader for what Apple has become and needed to be. Now, some people may disagree that Apple's not innovative enough, and that may be true. But at the end of the day, I think that they continue to have an incredible influence in the industry and an incredible market cap. So I think he is still doing a good job. He has a very ethical management style. He is a member of the LGBTQ IS2 community, so he comes at the world with a little bit of a different perspective, which is always good and always helpful. I think that he is a spotlight sharer, a little bit different than Steve, perhaps, but he empowers, recognizes, and elevates talent, and he's happy to do that. He tends to be a little bit more analytical, a little bit more, I don't want to say withdrawn, but quiet, different than Steve was. But in a lot of ways, that has enabled others at Apple to shine and to really elevate their status and their capability at the organization. He's also an outstanding speaker and motivator. So although he may be more reserved than Jobs was, it doesn't mean he's not good at what he does or that he can't inspire. So this is a really good example of, if you are more of an introverted person, if you're more of a quiet person, if you're more of a operational focused person, it doesn't mean that you can't be great. It just means that you have to understand how to build your brand differently. Mary Barra at GM is quite a bit of a different leader. Again, democratic, but more transformational. She was kind of put in charge of GM at a time where GM really needed to innovate. At the same time, she focuses on communication and empathy. She really is a leader that looks at empowerment, sustainability, accountability, all the things that keep an organization stable. Because if they're about to transform, if they need to move into electric and all of the other areas that the audio industry is going in, she needs to be really great at that. She's also great at hands-on crisis management and cultural transformation. She's really changed the feel and the culture at GM. It was a little broken before she came, and she's done a really good job of that. And she's really made it a better financial health company and more customer-centric, which they were having a little bit of problem with. The last example is Richard Branson, who is quite different than the other two. Very much a challenger leadership style. He's informal and down to earth, but a risk taker, a rule breaker. He jumps out of planes and jumps off of bridges and does all that kind of stuff. But at the same time, he still comes across as authentic. That's really who he is. And so it feels real. It doesn't feel like he's putting on a show for us. At the same time, he does have a hands-on approach, but he mentors leaders in a really good way. He's always listening and learning to make Virgin better. One thing I love about him is he focuses on what's missing in the marketplace, not on competitors. A lot of times we focus on competitors as leaders, when really we should be looking at what the marketplace is asking for, and he does a really good job of that. And then finally, he's a visionary to adapt and innovate multiple traditional industries. It's not like Virgin, whether it's airlines or hotels, or these are very traditional industries, but he kind of comes at them in a very different way. The one thing you'll notice about all of these examples is that, when I ask you, if I asked you about any of those leaders, you could probably give me a good number of the things I talked about in their leadership brand. And that's because they've been very good at building it. And that's what we want to do with you. At the end of the day, this retreat is all about understanding where things are going, who you are as a leader, how to build your brand, how to live in the age of AI and lead in the age of AI, how to adapt yourself to the future of work. You're not going to get this stuff anywhere else. So make sure you're there, May 7th to 9th, supercrucialleader.com. Be there. Be there. What's that old line? Be there or be square. I say.
Yeah, that dates us actually.
Yeah. Doesn't it? I know.
That ages us, Brad.
Be there. I'll just go with be there.
That's okay. I feel like the value that listeners would have gained just from hearing what you presented today was exponential, and so it's just a taste of what we are providing together. As you said earlier, this is our first LinkedIn Live together. We are doing 2 more. There will be another one on April 2nd, and you'll see that in our LinkedIn. If you go to LinkedIn and follow us at Super Crucial Leader, we are there. But also Brad is on LinkedIn. I'm on LinkedIn. We will be announcing the titles and the details of those LinkedIn Lives. So there'll be one on Tuesday, April 2nd, and then there's one the following, I think it's April 8th, Monday, April 8th. And we'll keep doing them to give you a taste of what to expect at our Super Crucial Leader retreats. And so very excited. Thank you for joining. And we did not see the comments on this one. I'll figure out the bugs on that one as well. But if you've posted anything on LinkedIn, both Brad and I will respond for sure. So we will respond through that forum. And if you have any questions, you can also email us, and our email is on the website, supercrucialleader.com. Thank you so much for your time, everybody, and have a great rest of the week. Brad, thank you for your wisdom and your excellence. Oh, we do have one question. Hang on. Let's do it before we go. We talked a lot about communication and collaboration. Do you have any tips for providing constructive feedback as a leader? Quickly, Brad, in 30 seconds or less.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, thank you, Danielle. Constructive feedback is such an important part of how we show up. What I would say to you is that feedback becomes way more constructive when you add in authenticity, integrity, all of the things that we talked about. I think that there has to be a circle of trust with your team. And when there is, you can give real, honest feedback that becomes constructive. So rather than trying to make the feedback constructive, what I would say is make sure that you're constructive. Make sure that you are
Good
leading your
answer.
team in the best possible way so that your feedback is taken in a circle of trust where they don't feel threatened, where they don't feel like you're judging, where they don't feel. Now, that takes a little bit of time, but there are ways to make that happen. At the retreat, we will talk all about that and how to make yourself constructive so that all the feedback you give is important to your team.
Yeah. Excellent. Well, thank you, Brad. We'll see you next Tuesday, April 2nd, for the follow-up LinkedIn Live. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Take
Thanks,
care.
Cheryl. Thanks, everyone.
Bye-bye.
Bye.